Activating her boundary, Shiro waved her hand as a web of sword slashes suddenly appeared around the queen and her two guards. Shocked at the speed of her slashes, the two guards quickly surrounded the queen and blocked the blades with their bodies. Che, solid bastards. Shiro furrowed her brows. Despite her sword ignoring 80% of all armor, they were still tanking her slashes like it was nothing. However, that was just the average slash, so it didn't worry Shiro too much. Looking at her, Limra had a pale face, and she couldn't help but feel an innate fear towards her. Seems like her fear resistance is pretty low. However, the guards have quite the high resistance. Shiro thought to herself as the two tried to attack her, but before the blades landed on her, Nantien flickered in front of the two and grabbed their blades with his hand. Don't go attacking. Her in front of me now. It's rather rude. Nantien smiled as he narrowed his eyes from behind the mask. Pushing his hands out, he deflected both the blades and slammed his fists into their chest. Bang! The impact of the punch reverberated through the place as the two guards were pushed back by a few steps. Seeing this, Shiro quickly activated the effect of her blade. Watching as runic patterns light up on her blade, suddenly, an invisible force pushed everyone aside and their figures became faint. It was almost as if they were in a soul-like state right now where no one else can affect them. Naturally, the guards rushed to Limra's side and wanted to help, but realized that their hands would phase through her. Glaring at Nantien, the full aura of a Tier 6 powerhouse crashed into his body as he forced a smile. Releasing his own aura, he summoned a blade and charged towards the two Tier 6s as a myriad of spells and attacks followed behind him. While this was happening, Limra was a little slow in facing off against Shiro due to the sword's fear skill. However, she wasn't affected for long as Limra pulled out an item and a purple glow wrapped around her body. Probably a fear-resistant type item, Shiro thought to herself while flickering in front of Limra. Flicking her wrist, she sent another web of slashes towards Limra's hand in an attempt to disarm her of the item. However, just as she did this, Limra raised her hand and a translucent barrier appeared in front of her. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro activated the third effect of her sword. Expending 2% of her mana, her sword seemed to glitch out for a moment before reappearing, past the barrier. Shocked at the sudden shift in the sword's location, Limra bent her body back nimble and dodged the blade. Reaching towards Shiro's abdominal area, a purple and red glow could be seen on her hand. Furrowing her brows, Shiro quickly dispersed her body in a mass of shadows. Limra's hand phased through and didn't manage to grab her. Activating her encroaching darkness skill, dark clouds loomed over the city as it suddenly became night. With this, the passive of her Sigil of Night was activated, doubling her power. Unfortunately, it wasn't absolute darkness, otherwise her power would have been quadrupled. Though there was one problem with this skill initially. In absolute darkness, she would be affected too, but with her new acquisition of the boundary, this was no longer a problem. Which only makes Shiro think that this skill was supposed to synergize with the boundary as it gotten thanks to Nyx. Thinking about this, she couldn't help but smirk as her body reassembled not too far from Limra. Seeing Shiro reappear, Limra didn't hesitate to wave her hand towards Shiro as several Tier 5 magic circles appeared around her. Smirking softly, Shiro cut them apart. With ease as Limra was shocked. Just as Shiro did this, she noticed a small bar on the bottom of her screen. Blessing of Ares, fighting aura, Mode 100. Remembering that she can consume the entire aura once it reaches 100 to gain an attack that ignores all armor and was enhanced with the power of a god, Shiro laughed as that was essentially overkill. After all, her sword's passive was helping. Her suppressed Limra easily, as the sword could only let them duel for a single minute. She had to make this short. If you're a mage, then I feel sorry for you, since I'm a mage's worst nightmare. Shiro laughed as she flickered towards Limra. Don't get too arrogant now. Limra narrowed her eyes as she summoned 2 daggers that seemed to glow with a mystical light. Queens are superior in physical strength too, she warned as she charged at Shiro. Quickly raising her sword, Shiro deflected the dagger as the second dagger pierced towards her face. Targeting my face so quickly? Are you jealous of my beauty? Don't worry, I understand, Shiro taunted as she ducked down and elbowed her in the stomach. Just as she did this, she saw Limra smirk and drop the dagger. Grabbing her shoulder, Shiro could feel her strength leaving her. Shit! Quickly diving into the rift, she forced some distance between them. Glancing at her stats, she frowned as the effect that she was being affected by. Siphoning 0.2% of your highest stat has been transferred for a short period of time. While the contact was short, 0.2% of her INT stat was already transferred. While it may sound little, 0.2% was still 112,830 points worth of INT for Limra. If the contact had lasted any longer, it would be much higher considering her overall stats. Seeing the number that she had just absorbed, Limra widened her eyes and smiled. At Shiro, If I absorb all of you and kill you, your stats will be mine. She grinned as there was obsession in her eyes. Without delay, she activated several of her abilities as her aura exploded out, forcing Shiro back. Reappearing before Shiro, she tried to grab her by the head. However, Shiro was able to react quick enough as her body dispersed into shadows. Reappearing behind Limra, Shiro knew that she couldn't hold back on her skills either, so she activated the following skills that had no backlashes. Pandora's. Requiem, third ability. Origin, Divine Raiment AX, Divine Empress's Domain, AX, Sylvanas Effect 1, 4, and 5. Debuffing Limra with her domain, she enhanced all elemental abilities as Sylvanas was coded with the power of the error element. With this, the sword will allow her to strike towards Limra's source code, as the sword's effect also makes it so that she will deal 100% true damage. Not only that, but the effect also 4 lets her infuse the sword with any element, and its powers will be boosted by 200% that ignores all resistance. This meant that Limra had no way to protect herself from her blade, but it becomes worse once one takes into consideration that with Pandora's Requiem's ability of turning all her mana into Origin, her spell efficiency was essentially tripled, as Origin makes it so that her spells receive a 300% boost to power that lasts for 5 minutes. Feeling the touch of death behind her, Limra had cold sweat fall down her back as she turned around as she should. However, with the feeling of death so close behind her, no matter how fast she turned, it felt slow to her. Catching a glimpse of Shiro from the corner of her eye, she saw the sword that was wrapped with a malevolent glow that was also strangely mesmerizing. The flickering of light was almost like a sky full of stars as the sword slowly approached her. Knowing that her death was close if she was hit by this, Limra bit her lip and activated her trump card, a set of black and purple robes wrapped around. Her body as an illusionary purple crown could be seen above her head. Gritting her teeth, she tried her best to dodge the blade. Poochie! Despite her efforts, the blade still cut against her shoulder as her entire right arm was cut off. Feeling pain that was far worse than what she had felt before, Limra couldn't hold back a scream as she quickly backed off from Shiro. Unfortunately, for her, Shiro wasn't done. There was still 25 seconds left to the duel, and by the end of it, there was going to be one dead queen. Takamikazuchi Technique Plus Boundary. Boosting her speed and attack, she had another set of skills up her sleeve. Activating Pandora's Requiem's 5th ability, Divine Enchantment. Shiro enchanted her skill, Keitoma, to the next tier. The skill itself was something that could restrain people for a short period of time anyways, but it reached the next tier. The duration and the strength of the restriction naturally increased. With the queen frozen in place, she was an easy target for Shiro's sword. Slashing her body to pieces, Shiro watched as the system notification of her receiving a decrease in stats thanks to her being in Lima's domain disappeared. Seeing this, the two guards cried out in shock as they both activated their trump cards against Nantien. However, he only smiled and transformed his body into light, evading their attacks with ease. Seems like your queen is done for. Why do you keep fighting? Nantien asked with a smirk. Because I'll make sure she isn't the only one who dies today. One of the guards shouted out as he pulled his hand back and a golden spear materialized. Throwing it towards Shiro, a shockwave exploded out from the force. Naturally, Shiro could sense the approaching danger and tried to dive into the rift, but just as she did this, the portal to the rift was shocked by a flicker of electricity from the spear and was cancelled out. You cannot escape this spear. The guard glared at Shiro with killing intent. Are you sure about that? Nantien suddenly spoke up as he flickered next to the spear. Grabbing the handle, he twisted his body and slammed it down against the ground. Widening his eyes in shock, the guard couldn't help but question what he was seeing. The spear that he had thrown was one that cannot be stopped and will strike the target always. However, the man had just grabbed it with his bare hands and threw it away from harm. Surprised, Nantien chuckled as some of his sleeve was ripped up from that spear, revealing his toned arms. Thanks. Shiro nodded her head, as she might have been forced to use some of her life-saving skills if she wanted to survive that spear. Gritting his teeth, the guard summoned 2 more golden spears and threw it towards them while the second guard charged. Fourth with a great sword. Seems like they won't back down without a fight. I can't use my rift either since the spear stops that. Shiro frowned. Don't worry, I'll handle the spears. You can just focus on killing them. Nantien smiled as Shiro raised her eyebrows. Protector's grasp. As long as I am in front of you, I can deflect any attack so long as I'm strong enough, Nantien said as Shiro nodded her head. Twirling her sword for a moment, she flickered towards the man with the great sword. She only had a few seconds left of her buffs, so she wanted to kill one more if she could. Appearing in front of him, she activated her boundary as a web of unblockable slashes appeared in front of him. Gritting his teeth, there was a crazed look to his face as he dropped his sword and took on the full brunt of her slashes. Feeling the sword cleave into his flesh, He laughed as the remaining slashes bounced off his flesh, despite the fact that they ignored 100% of all forms of defense. Anobea. Furrowing her brows, Shiro quickly raised her sword and blocked a strike that was targeting her ribs. Bang! Launching her body away, the guard charged towards her with flaming fists. Shiro! Nantian called out while deflecting a few more spears. I'm fine. Just focus on taking your target down. Shiro shouted back, as she had a frown on her face. Quickly healing herself up with grace, she changed her element to lightning and flashed towards the guard. Slashing towards him once more, she expended some of her mana to cause the sword to shift forward in space. Flickering past his guard, she slashed against his throat only for her sword to bounce off once more. Confused by this outcome, Shiro quickly dispersed into shadows before he could land another devastating blow against her. Furrowing her brows, she analyzed what she had experienced so far while dodging his strikes. Unfortunately, her dodges weren't perfect as her buffs had run out. Returning back to her original stats, it was rather difficult to dodge his strikes without suffering a few minor injuries from using her sword as a shield. After the first strike, the rest were useless. Could he have a skill that makes it so that I can only attack him once with each weapon? Shiro thought to herself as she had experienced a similar skill back in her first life. Waving her hand, a myriad of swords appeared in the air as she sent them towards him, while quickly retreating. Seeing this, the guard raised his hands and guarded himself. Poochie! 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 Stabbing into his body, he grit his teeth and endured the punishment. Understanding that his passive skill had been found out, he quickly activated the second part of his skill. Retribution, he commanded as 5 Tier 6 magic circles appeared around Shiro. Before Shiro could slash them apart, illusionary swords stabbed into her body as they mirrored the damage that the guard had taken. Watching her HP decrease rapidly, Shiro quickly activated rejuvenation before her HP was emptied out. Healing herself back to full, she slashed apart the magic circles and dashed towards him, activating her new skill, Limit Focus. Shiro fueled 20% of her total int stat into raw power. A burning white glow wrapped around a newly crafted blade from nanobots as Shiro used her skill, Item Master, to further increase her power output. The skill Limit Focus would take her stats as fuel and return them after 10 hours. Hence why she could use it without worrying about the permanent effects. However, if she was to use anything else to fuel her power, it would be worse. Hence why she decided to unload most of her stat points into INT when she came out of the Forgotten Realm. That way she had a main source that she could use for this attack. Grrr! Slashing towards the Guardian, a burning white energy enveloped her vision as it cleaved the guard in half. But the attack wasn't done. Ripping towards the city, it split the ground in half as screams and panic could be heard. Looking at the giant ravine that she had created, Shiro apologized in her mind, but didn't stop just yet since the guard wasn't dead. Despite being cut in half, his flesh twitched for a moment before sewing itself back together. Shiro wasn't surprised, since she could do the same, hence why she didn't drop her guard. Error, she commanded, as his wasn't completely healed from her hand, and circuits erupted out, as it lashed out towards the guard and entered his body. Arg! Crying out from the unbearable pain, he could feel himself being eaten alive as his regeneration tried to heal him. However, this only served to distract him, since Shiro was allowed to attack him during this instant. Creating a new sword, she wrapped the sword in the same white glow from the previous attack, expending 20% of her INT stat once more. Piercing towards his chest, a surge of pure white energy charred a clean hole through his chest as she could see several skyscrapers being affected by her attack. Grabbing the guard's head without thinking about the casualties of this fight just yet, she slammed him towards the ground. As a reaction, the guard reached out toward her elbow and punched it as hard as he could. Breaking her arm in an instant, Shiro didn't flinch at all as she only stared at him with unflinching, cold eyes. Activating grace to heal her arm, she created 2 daggers and stabbed them into his face before twisting them clockwise with her spare hand. Bang! Crashing against the ground, a large crater was formed from the attack as the guard's hand turned black. Grabbing Shiro's wrist, a string of curses started to travel up her arm. Take my arm, then. I don't care, Shiro said coldly as she summoned a dagger and cut her arm off without hesitation. Activating the 3rd charge of grace, she regenerated her arm and activated her true spirit nature. Wrapping countless illusionary chains around his body, she pierced his chest and started to rip something out. A faint blue energy could be seen as Shiro was pulling it out of the guard's body with great difficulty. Ping! Shattering the chains around him, the guard managed to stop this in time as Shiro quickly jumped back and slammed her hand against the ground. Grrr! Sending out a wave of cold mist, everything around her was frozen in an instant, including the guard. With the effect of her sword, all of his resistances towards ice were ignored, as he was frozen solid. Forming a hammer with nanobots, she tacked several strength-enhancing skills in the hammer and slammed it against his body. Kish! Shattering him to countless pieces, she could see the flesh trying its best to regenerate, but it was slowing down. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro activated Force of Elements and coated it around a spear. Normally, she would use her sword, but since a weapon no longer works on this man, after he's been attacked by it, she had to keep making new weapons with different blueprints. Fusing the power of her spirit nature along with her skill, he threw the spear towards him with everything she's got. Argh! Crying out in pain, the man watched as the spear pierced through his half-regenerated body, and the illusionary figure of him was forced out of his body. With the spear through his soul, Shiro narrowed her eyes and summoned a familiar lantern. Lashing. Out with a semi-translucent chain, she grabbed the man's soul and imprisoned it into her lantern. Letting out a deep breath, Shiro took a moment to let her body relax, as constantly activating powerful skills put a strain on her body. While the skills may say that they had no backlashes, that wasn't including the strain it put on your body. Sure, one or two would have no visible or obvious effects, but several tens of skills definitely strained her. Looking up into the sky, Shiro could see that Nantien was having a bit of trouble, as he was essentially a glass cannon just like her. And the guard that he was facing against had a skill that made all his skills a guaranteed hit. As she was now not behind him, his skill that allowed him to deflect attacks was no longer working. Just as she was about to rush up, she sensed anger and hate around her. Glancing around, she could see the scared faces of humans who were pointing their weapons towards her. Understanding that there must have been several casualties thanks to her attacks, Shiro could only sigh and ignore the glares. For now, as cold as it was, she knew the risks and still continued the attacks to kill the guard. In her mind, getting rid of one Tier 6 guard was more important than a few lives that could have been spared. Plus, if she tried to spare them, there was the chance that she could have died herself had she not kept up the barrage. I was lucky I had to face this guy rather than the guard that Nantien is facing, Shiro thought to herself, since her skill set allowed her to ignore this guard's passive. If she couldn't create different weapons, it would be annoying to try dealing with the guard since the same weapon wouldn't work twice. And then, Nantien doesn't have a variety of weapons like you do, and you don't have his durability despite you also being a glass cannon. Should the guards switch places, I'd say you'd be dead and Nantien would be following up shortly after. Nimue replied honestly, and Shiro agreed with her statement. Just as she was about to help Nantien, she felt an attack directed at her, summoning. Sylvanas, she cut the attack apart and glared towards the person who fired the attack. Seeing a young man with tears in his eyes, Shiro could sense incredible hatred from his glare. Not backing down at all, Shiro glared back before standing up properly. With her sword unsheathed, the spectators felt a strong sense of fear towards her as they started to back off slowly, ignoring. Then once more, Shiro jumped into the air and flickered behind the guard while he was preoccupied with Nantien. Sensing danger behind him, he turned around and threw a dagger at Shiro. But before the dagger could come anywhere close, Nantien appeared in front of him and caught the dagger with his hand. Now that she's back, your attacks don't work anymore. Nantien smiled as his skill was activated once more. Did you have a nice workout? He then glanced back at Shiro with a smile. It was decent. Made me use 3 charges of grace before I could kill him. Shiro replied with a shrug. Oh? Well, you still have 7 more, no? Nantien chuckled. True. Hearing that the second guard was killed, the first guard immediately knew that he was going to die if he continued to fight. Making the decision of escaping immediately, he wanted to turn around, but a cage of light appeared around him as it was. Then followed up by ice chains. Want to leave after trying to kill us? Not so easy. Shiro narrowed her eyes as the guard gritted his teeth and shattered the chains to pieces. Summoning a sword, he slashed towards the light cage. Glancing at Shiro, Nantien gestured for her to attack all she wanted, as he was going to keep her safe from his attacks. I'll be fine. I want to see what you can do. Shiro chuckled as Nantien only shrugged his shoulders and shrugged. If that's what you want. But I don't have a tone of crazy one-hit attacks like you do, so this might take a while. Nantien chuckled as Shiro shrugged. Ah, Novesh. In that case, I might as well finish him quickly then. I don't want to stay here longer than necessary. Shiro sighed as she massaged her neck. Summoning Sylvanas to her side, she activated Hollow Deceit, Eyes of the Gorgon, and Limit Focus. Fueling 30% of her INT sat into her blade, a blinding white radiance exploded out from her sword as her body disappeared. Reappearing in front of the guard with several identical clones, Shiro slashed out with the help of Boundary. Trying his best to dodge the attack, his movements were restrained by the cage of light that surrounded his body. Raising his spear in an attempt to block the strike, he widened his eyes in shock as his spear was cut in half with him following shortly after. Quickly regenerating his body, He wanted to lash out towards her, but Shiro didn't give him that chance. Using boundary, she slashed his hands apart and plunged her sword into his chest. Twisting the handle, she then thrust it up as it traveled through his body and reappeared, out the back of his head. Flicking her sword, she cut a clean hole through his body as the head was decapitated in an instant. While he was still trying to regenerate, Shiro activated her true spirit nature. Summoning her lantern, she wrapped her chain around his body and ripped out his soul while he was still healing. Sealing it away, she watched as his body crumpled into a lifeless corpse. The fact that you can rip souls out and imprison them is ridiculous. You do realize that was a tier 6, right? Nantian laughed. And it's not like he could prepare himself for me ripping out his soul now, could he? Plus, if I tried to rip it out while he wasn't restrained, I'd be in danger, you know, Shiro replied as Nantian understood what she meant. They did take their opponents off guard after all. With how diverse Shiro's skill set was, the moment you think she has used up all her skills, she'll pull out another one out of nowhere. With the queen and 2 guards killed, Shiro's level jumped up by quite a few levels, upgrading her from 300 to 340. Pulling out her earpiece, she turned it on. "Do you guys hear me?" Shiro said as there was a short pause before the mic was turned. "Yes, we can. I've dealt with the queen and the 2 guards. How's the search for the prisoners coming along?" Shiro asked, since that was their main goal. They were lucky that their surprise attack worked quite well, as the queen wasn't able to react properly before she was killed. We found their location. We're just trying to get them out without the guards surrounding us," Samuel replied as Shiro furrowed her brows. "Give me a second. Stay where you are." Flying up into the sky, she activated her skill analysis and scanned the entire city. Discovering where Samuel and the group was, she could see quite a few guards patrolling around. Most of them were tier 5s, with the occasional tier 4 watching. Areas of low importance. I've already used 70% of my INT stat for my attacks, but the remaining 30% should be enough for this, Shiro thought to herself as she flexed her fingers and a myriad of weapons appeared in the air around her. Creating special bullets with her ice element, she fired towards all of the guards that were patrolling the area. Hearing Shiro's response, the team looked at each other in confusion. "She's already dealt with the queen and that we should stay where we are?" One of the tracking spirits asked with disbelief. "Apparently. Oi, don't doubt her highness. Did you not feel the aura and the reverberation through the ground when they fought? Now that it is silent and her highness called us, it's only natural that she won." Samuel lectured as he peeked out from the corner, just in time to see several bullets drill through the walls and into the body of the guards. "Grrr!" Before they could even scream, they were turned into ice statues as Samuel blinked in surprise. "I believe you can move now. I've frozen all the guards in this place." Shiro's voice rang out as the team looked out and saw the ice statues. "Ah, understood," Samuel replied before putting the earpiece away. Seeing that the team were moving quickly, Shiro sighed in relief before her body swayed for a moment. Quickly giving her some support, Nantian could see that her body was abnormally cold to the touch. While she was cold anyways, this was on another level. "Are you okay?" he asked with a frown. Just a bit of mana deficiency, I suppose. I have just almost emptied out my entire reservoir of 9 billion mana in a short span of time," Shiro joked as Nantian rolled his eyes. "Try not to harm yourself. Like this if you can." He sighed. "I'll try." Talking for a bit longer, the team returned with the prisoners. "So are these all the people that you can find?" Shiro asked with a frown, since they only brought 2 people with them. Gritting their teeth, they could only nod. Staying silent, Shiro took a deep breath as she summoned the lantern once more. "Oi, ancient terror," Shiro called out coldly. Hearing nothing back, Shiro narrowed her eyes and snapped her finger. Flickering with a green light, the lantern started to shake. Hearing a cry of pain, the group were surprised. Snapping her finger once more, Shiro stopped the light. "Are you going to talk now?" she asked coldly. Fine, fine, you sadistic woman." The voice squeezed out as Shiro nodded her head. "You should have 2 companions that have just joined you in there. I don't care if you kill them, consume them, or whatever. Make sure they die as painfully as possible," Shiro ordered. "Ha ha ha. And what makes you think that I will follow your will?" The ancient terror laughed. "Because staying in the lantern, not doing anything is pretty boring, no? Why don't you entertain yourself with the souls I retrieve?" Shiro smirked. Considering her proposal for a moment, a burst of laughter could be heard. "Sure, torturing these fools should bring me some enjoyment, but if I get bored, I won't do it anymore." "Up to you." Snapping her finger, several runes appeared on the surface of the lantern as she removed the barrier between the ancient terror and the 2 guards' souls. Closing one of her eyes, she could see the ancient terror's twisted smile as he looked at the 2 guards with sadistic intent. Unsummoning the lantern, Shiro saw the elders were rather confused as to what that was. Naturally, Nantian was the same. "Just a monster that I have captured." He'll torture the souls of the guards that helped the queen capture you guys. Unlike the ones that have passed on, the guards won't be reincarnated. Shiro waved her hand nonchalantly. Hearing this, one of the elders that had been imprisoned broke into tears as he kneeled and bowed towards her. "Thank you, Your Highness," he cried out as he watched his friends die to the guards and he could do nothing. The fact that the guards will have their souls tortured and pushed out of reincarnation made him happy inside as they suffered a fate, worse than the spirits that have passed on thanks to their attacks. He could still remember their arrogant appearances and smug smiles while harassing them with attacks, forcing them to run. Those that didn't were killed. His only regret was that he couldn't kill them himself, but this was good enough. Anyways, enough talk for now. Let's return to the capital. We have more important matters. Don't forget to look at the anchor before you leave, Shiro, Nimue reminded as Shiro nodded her head, since that had slipped her thoughts. Actually, Nantien, you take them back to the capital. I'm going to check out the anchor quickly, Shiro said as Nantien nodded his head. Are there any more Tier 6 individuals? He asked just in case. Sending out her energy, since her senses were better than Nantien's, Shiro shook her head. There were only 2 large sources of energy. The rest are all Tier 5. Then they can't harm you. Do you need any life-saving items just in case? Nantien asked. I'll be fine. Just help me take them back, okay? Shiro smiled, nodding his head. Tien escorted the group back, while Shiro flew towards the largest building, where she sensed the signature resembling that of an anchor. Rano slashing through the edges of the room with ease, she landed softly and looked at the glowing piece of crystal that had dimmed quite substantially. You're still here, aren't you, Limra? Shiro called out with coldness in her voice. If you don't respond, I'll shatter this anchor. What I killed was an avatar that you spent quite some effort in, she warned. I'm here. Limra's voice rang out, but it was weak. What do you want with me? She asked as there was fear in her voice, almost as she was a child who was scared of an angry parent. I want to know about the power of the Vela, who had suppressed my spirit race. You're the new spirit queen, Limra called out in surprise as Shiro nodded her head. Now tell me about Vela. It was her that dragged you into this mess anyways. Bang! Before Limra could say never, Shiro slammed her fist against the anchor as it dimmed down some more after a few pieces were chipped off the structure. Think twice before you answer. I don't care about whether or not you give me information, since I'll figure it out eventually when I kill her as... Well, Shiro threatened, quickly explaining all she knew, which wasn't much since Limra didn't fight against Vela. Shiro shattered the anchor, without hesitation, much to Limra's shock. Looking at the shattered crystal, Shiro had a frown on her face. It was just common knowledge, she muttered with displeasure. All she discovered was what Vela ruled over, as well as some instances of her power being used. Most of this could be told to her by the spirits in her mana realm. Vela was the queen of phantoms. She controls all ghost-like monsters, which are resistant to physical attacks, and have high tolerances to magical attacks, which made it hard for even the most powerful spirit to go against her. Not to mention, she was also tricky to lock down. Herself. You're a good counter to her since you interact with the soul directly, Estrella said as Shiro nodded her head. True, but we don't know where her location is right now on Earth. If we did, we'll be able to launch an attack before she can build up her forces. So what do you plan to do with this city? Leave it. They'll sort themselves out. I have more pressing matters. Shiro sighed and picked up a few pieces of the anchor and stored them into her inventory. She wanted to take a better look at them herself at a later date. Leaving the building, she made her way to the teleport shrine and teleported back to the island resort. Letting the elders rest for now, Shiro talked with Samuel about their next steps. How much do you know about queens? Shiro asked as she sat with her legs crossed. She was currently looking at a few reports on the state of the elders, and she couldn't help but frown at the extent of their injuries. I know that each queen would send an avatar to this world first to secure a city with their anchor. They would also bring a few trusted guards. After a while, their true body would arrive if nothing goes wrong. Indeed. What do you know about anchors, then? Shiro asked, as she wanted to verify the extent of knowledge that Samuel knew, as well as if her information was correct or not. While she did extract this information using torture from the Fire Queen, there were still doubts surrounding it. Tapai. Know that to place more anchors, a queen needs to infuse their power into it, making them weak for a while. But their subjects will donate their strength, and the queen should become stronger over time. The more anchors they place down, the more strength they can obtain in the long term, but in the short term they are severely weakened. That is correct. I think our next step should be to craft our own anchor, since my situation is a little different. Each queen comes from a previous world, and they are allowed to pick a spot for their anchor with the help of the system. But I don't have that benefit since I come from this world. Plus, I have a place in mind where I can place this anchor, but its exact location is rather mysterious. I'll need some time to do all my preparations. I wish to leave for a rather long journey, so I'll have to leave the spirits under the Elder's care as you have done before. But once I finish the preparations, I'll move everyone to a floating fortress that can protect itself, and the anchor would be mobile to avoid attacks, Shiro said as Samuel nodded his head. As you command. Giving him a phone to contact her should anything go wrong, she left the capital with Nantien. Are you sure you want to leave the spirit race so quickly despite coming back? Nantien asked while glancing back at the spirit capital. We don't have much time. We've already run into 2 No-3 queens with their anchors now. They are already amassing their armies while we don't even have a base yet. I want to set up this base and be around the same level before the new age arrives, Shiro replied. Plus, we need make 2 potentially long trips. 1 to get the shard of the garden, a very important part of the anchor, and the second is to find a suitable location. Since I have my nanobots, I can choose anywhere to place the anchor as long as there is a lot of mana. This is the advantage I have over the other queens since they have to find a spot that is dense with mana and people like a city. Moreover, they only have 1 chance. Once they place it down, they cannot move it as they don't have the means to make a floating city. Like I do. She chuckled as Nantien smiled. You seem quite excited. Of course. The future was quite grim, but I'm already changing it by making the anchor as well as my own city. Compared to what I have seen in the future, I'm already making more progress. As a queen, Shiro smiled. Thinking about the future, she couldn't help but wonder how Lysandra had her wings dyed to black, and when Addie grew us. What about your biological child? Nimue asked with a smug expression, as Shiro clicked her tongue, and glared at her. Hush about it. Shiro rolled her eyes before focusing back on real life. So where is this shard of the garden? Knowing the context of everything, this shard is an important piece of this earth, and the moment it loses it, the world is destroyed. No? Nantien asked as Shiro nodded her head. I have a map here, but the location is somewhat vague, Shiro said as she pulled out the map. Having a look at the map, Nantien furrowed his brows because he didn't recognize the land at all. Do you think it's in the unexplored areas of this world? Perhaps. After all, the places we've been to only encompass a small part of everything. Exploring this world and the proper natives would be quite interesting, Shiro replied as the map was quite strange. It was made from this golden material that would shimmer under the sunlight. Almost as if it was a hologram, but the image never changed. Storing the map away, Shiro brought out her phone. Right now, the map in my mind is the most updated version that they have on the internet. I think the government might have a more advanced version, so I'm going to give my parents a call and ask them about it. They are pretty close to the government, so they should know. Then, if they don't know, I can ask the sect master to look into this matter personally, too. Nantien smiled. Calling her parents, Shiro waited for a moment before she heard them pick up. Darling, have you finished the god trials? Mio's voice rang out. I have. Sorry for not contacting you earlier. Shiro apologized. Oh, it's nothing. I just didn't know the life or death of my precious daughter while the other one is out in the front lines training with her cousin. Hearing this, Shiro understood that her mother must have been worried. Sorry about that, Mum. Heis. It's okay. I'm just glad you're safe. So how can I help? Mio asked as she knew that Shiro wouldn't call for nothing. If she wanted to talk to her, Shiro would have come back to the house. And straight to the point. Shiro chuckled. Would you rather me spend the next hour talking about daily life with you? I can do that too. Mio laughed. That would be fine if you wanted that, Mum. I would love to foo-foo, but your mum's a bit busy right now. Just as she said this, Shiro heard the sound of someone screaming and a blade running through his body. Are you in the middle of combat right now? Shiro asked. There was a monster horde that broke out of one of the mutated dungeons. We're just clearing it up now. The mutation was much faster than expected, so we couldn't close it in time. Mio replied casually while killing a few more monsters. Rono B, your dad is also here, but he's fighting against the boss right now. Emin, let him focus on that for now. Anyways, my question is, does the government have a much more detailed map of the world that isn't shown to the public over the internet? Like the unexplored areas? Shiro asked. They do, but it's only slightly better than the one we have on the internet. They want to verify the information first before distributing it, Mio replied after a short pause. I see. Do you think I'd be able to get my hands on it? Plus, do they have any other kind of maps? Shiro asked. They do. They have a map of resources, every dungeon resisted, underground caverns, ravines, special locations and places that are sealed off by strange magic. They also have a map of areas that are high in the danger scale where tier 5s would have a hard time surviving, Mio replied. As for whether or not you can get your hands on it, you'll probably need to be a bit more forceful with the old geezers. Up top. That's what me and your dad have been doing since they were quite cocky at first. They thought they could rule over us by being slightly above average and had more manpower, but after the first few fights, they learned their lesson. She huffed as Shiro laughed. Sounds like you and Dad don't have a nice relationship with the government? A little. But I'm sure if you go to the headquarters and tell them that you're our daughter, they'll listen to you. If they don't, just fight them, I suppose. Knowing your strength, they can probably put up a decent fight for you. If they still don't accept, just call us and we'll go there personally, Mio suggested as Shiro's smile twitched. Are you sure I should be threatening the government at will for a map? Yep, they're stingy. Plus, you can probably reveal that. You're the owner of the guns without too many problems now, since you can protect yourself. With us, as your parents, they will also think twice about antagonizing you. Trust your mum, they just have a strong appearance. They're cowards, otherwise they would be on the front lines fighting the battles themselves. Mio spat out as Shiro could tell that her mother was not a fan of the government. If they spout any righteous bullshit, feel free to cut them off, okay? Got it, Mum. I won't disturb you any longer. Make sure you and Dad stay safe, okay? Shiro smiled. Love you, darling. Mio chuckled. Love you too, Mum. Ending the call, Shiro put her phone away. How was it? Nantian asked. Mum just told me to go to the government's place and claim the map for myself. Apparently, my parents aren't a fan of the government. Shiro shrugged her shoulder. Sounds about right. The more powerful adventurers dislike the government, but they understand the need for one. Most of the time, so long as the government doesn't target them specifically, the powerhouses just ignore them. Nantian nodded his head. Is the old man one of them, too? The sect leader? Shiro asked. Man, I know it doesn't look like it, but apparently the sect leader was very hot-headed when he was younger. He would pick fights and taunt people all the time while enjoying himself. Nantian chuckled. Oh, damn. That does not sound like the old man at all, does it? No, it does not. Talking for a little longer, Shiro searched up where the government office was. Located near the center of the humans' territory, they had carved deep into the ground and formed a giant supercity of sorts that is armed to the teeth. There are a total of 5 circles to this place. The outermost circle is light defenses, which will protect the city from long-range barrages and magic attacks. The second is responsible for melee combatants that arrive past the initial defenses. The third are heavily armored troops. The fourth is a group of elite adventurers. As for the fifth, it was the government's trump card. It was an adventurer group that were essentially on the same standard as the heroes. Not much is known about this group, as the government hadn't needed to deploy them often, but when they are deployed, any major threat is resolved rather quickly. The city itself was called Larit, and there were quite a few teleport circles near the city, but nothing inside. Hiring a band of adventurers for the Larit teleport shrine, they arrived near the super city. Looking at the giant city in the distance that was situated behind tall walls, Shiro couldn't help but whistle at its impressiveness. It is the pride of the government, I suppose. If you had to attack this by yourself, how successful do you think you'll be? Shiro asked curiously. If they had a full army, I'd say I'll have a 70 to 80% chance of destroying everything. There's not enough information on the mysterious group, so I can't say for certain, so they could have someone of your level of strength. Highly unlikely, but not impossible. What about you? Nantian asked. As a tier 6, his strength far outclasses a tier 5, so he could attack this place all by himself without care. But if there are people like Shiro, then doing so would be suicidal. For me? Well, not to be confident, but I'd say around 80 to 90%. A lot of my skills favor one against many, so this is actually good for me. Plus, I have a lot of large-scale attacks that are helpful for clearing out large amounts of people at once. The more there are, the better it is for me. Though, of course, if I charge in blindly, I'll get overwhelmed by the sheer amount of spells. But if I stay on my guard and use my boundary with Celestial Path to get rid of the spells, I'll have a pretty easy time, I'd say. Shiro replied, after taking a few of her spells into consideration. The thing that gave her the most confidence in destroying this base is her divine grade skill Pandora's Requiem, since the War Saint skill helps out a lot with its instant kill passive. And there was also the God's Blessings that she had achieved from Mount Olympus, amongst the myriad of skills that she owns. I can definitely see why my mum and dad had an easy time charging into this place. After all, they're more powerful than I was before. Even back then, I'd say I had a 60 to 70% chance of clearing this place if I played my cards correctly, Shiro muttered. How do you think you'll fare against your parents now? Nantian asked curiously. Pretty good, but I don't know their full skill set and abilities. I'll need to have a spar against them again, but I think I'll be able to counter some of my mum's abilities since they resemble the boundary a lot, Shiro replied after musing about it for a moment. That's quite impressive, considering that your parents are probably one of the strongest in the world. Nantian smiled as Shiro laughed. Well, I suppose surpassing them and protecting them is one of my motivations in this new age, so any strength I can get is helpful. True. They'll also be worrying about you. After all, you are their daughter, and seeing you risk yourself in front of them would not be a nice feeling, Nantien said as Shiro agreed. If she saw Yin, Lysandra, or Atty risk themselves in front of her and she couldn't do anything, the feeling would be agonizing from her standpoint. Hence why she understood how worried her parents would be. But as one of the strongest people around, she was the shield for her friends and family. Naturally, she's excited for the time when her party becomes strong enough to stand beside her. But for now, she was their protector. She wasn't too worried about them not getting stronger either. Lyrica is a talented swordswoman who is also the daughter of her best friend. From what she had seen, there is a good chance that Lyrica will surpass her mother in becoming the elven sword saintess. Madison is a candidate to be the demon queen, so naturally they were going to help her ascend. Arim is a rare mage who has obtained control over gravity. Sylvia was an amazing healer. Helion was chosen by the god of blacksmithing. Lysandra was an angel. Yin is a phoenix. And Chen Yu was one of the strongest assassins she had ever seen. As for Nantien, he is probably the first tier 6 to have ascended from Earth, so that spoke plenty of his strength. Anyways, you think us observing them for such a long time would have caught their attention by now? Surely they would have come to greet us. Or do you think they believe we're not worth the attention? Shiro asked with a smirk. Rao Bess, give them a minute. Perhaps they're assessing the danger level. After all, you aren't restraining your aura, so they can definitely feel your strength. Nantien laughed. He already felt like he was standing next to a dragon despite being tier 6, so he could only wonder what the officials were feeling in the city. And as expected, several guards soon approached them. Esteemed ones, do you require something from the city? The guard bow with sweat dripping off their heads. Both of these two mysterious people had their levels hidden, but they knew that these two were very powerful. Standing in front of the two was rather difficult, as they felt an innate fear toward Shiro. I don't require something from the city, but rather the government. Shiro smiled as they looked at one another. May we ask what you require so that we can pass on the message? The guard asked. Sure, why not? I won't make your life too hard. Shiro nodded. I want a map of everything the government has to offer. Tunnels, unexplored areas, resource areas, and so on. I want the most detailed map the government has to offer, she said as the guards paused for a moment, since this information was extremely important. If this kind of information got into the hands of other people, they could do plenty of harm to the human race. What? Don't tell me you can't do that? Shiro smiled as she narrowed her eyes. Just get your higher-ups to come here and I'll talk to them. I don't think you can be responsible for this kind of decision. She laughed. Looking at each other, they sighed and nodded their heads. Watching them retreat, Shiro glanced at Nantien. Well, that went pretty well, no? Shiro chuckled. They were definitely trying to suppress their fear. I don't think the higher-ups can do anything about the fear effect either. Nantien chuckled. True. Do you happen to be the higher-up of your part of the mysterious group? Shiro called out as she glanced at the small hill behind her. Suddenly, a portal opened, and a young man walked out of the portal. You discovered me? He asked with a curious voice. Well, it's not hard considering a gathering of mana can be felt behind me. Shiro shrugged. Seems like you're quite sensitive to mana. Tell me, why do you require such a detailed map? Are you perhaps working for a queen? The man asked with a smile. You sound like there have been people asking about this before us. Shiro chuckled. There has been, and they have yet to give me a good reason for giving them a map. The man shrugged. And sounds like you drove them away. Are you not afraid of the queens? Shiro asked. Afraid? Not quite. The queens are not strong enough to warrant any fear as of yet PFT, ha 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 ha. Hearing his response, Shiro couldn't help but laugh, which caused him to frown. Sorry, I haven't heard anything so stupid in so long. The queens don't deserve fear? That's only because they're too busy with amassing their armies. Please, tell me how you will fight a queen when they amass an army. Shiro asked as she reappeared in front of him with her blade across his neck. With the blade unsheathed, the fear passive activated, and the man couldn't help but sweat. However, he was not affected too badly. I feel as though you are underestimating the government. He smiled. Oh? Are you sure? Shiro had a smug grin as she brought out her phone and tapped a few buttons. Watching the screen, he widened his eyes as he saw the most detailed map the government had in its possession. I wasn't sitting around doing nothing. Your security was rather lackluster. Shiro laughed and hopped down. Let's go, Shiro said to Nantien as he nodded his head. But before they could leave, several portals opened up as the man had a frown on his face. Seems like they want to fight. Shiro smiled, as Nantien only sighed. Are you really sure you want to fight? I can guarantee that what you're about to do is a terrible idea. Shiro chuckled while glancing up at the young man. Hearing no reply, she only shrugged her shoulders before flexing her finger. Suddenly, several nanotech nails appeared between her fingers as she threw them towards the portals. Ping, ping, ping! Shattering them to pieces, the man widened his eyes as Shiro canceled his attack in an instant. Should we just lock him up for a bit or kill him? Shiro asked as both she and Nantien appeared behind him, with ice chains erupting out of the ground. And a cage of light restraining the man, he was not able to move at all. Probably just lock him up since the government does need him after all, Nantien suggested as Shiro nodded her head. Making sure that the chains won't be broken for a while, she dragged Nantien into the rift and disappeared from the spot. After, they disappeared. The man released a breath that he didn't know he was holding. Cold sweat ran down his back as he clearly understood that he had underestimated the power of the young girl. This wasn't even including the man either, since he didn't do much. Furrowing his brows, he sent a message to the government. Leaving the rift, the two started to walk away as if nothing had happened. Are you sure you should let me tell the government about our identity? Nantien asked, as Shiro didn't wear her mask at all, so he had a good look at her face. Yeah, that's fine. Even if they know it's me, what can they do? Shiro laughed, since her parents had probably done worse. Anyways, how is the map? Is it good? Enough? Nantien asked. Somewhat. It shows a bit more, but not enough. Shiro sighed, since the map that she had retrieved from the government's database only had slightly more land covered than the map she already had. It was helpful, but not as helpful as she had hoped. I suppose we can only uncover the rest ourselves, then, Nantien said, as Shiro nodded her head. Right then, how do you think we should look for the shard of the garden? Since we don't know how the world looks, we don't exactly know where to look, do we? Shiro asked. And if we randomly charge in a direction, it would prove to be more annoying, in terms of wasting time. Who knows if we're actually getting closer or further away? Nantien sighed. Do you think you can track the energy of the shard, or is that not possible? Unfortunately, no. Different anchors may feel similar, but that's only because the materials used are quite close. The shard is something unique, and unless it's a smaller anchor of the same queen, no two anchors will feel exactly the same. So trying to track down the shard from our world is going to be hard. Shiro shrugged. I do have a skill I received from Hermes, though. I'm not sure if I want to use it or not. Shiro sighed. What skill is it? Nantien asked. It's a gateway to any destination I have, visited or know about, so long as I have a clear understanding of its location. Since we have a map, I'm not sure if it counts or not, Shiro said as Nantien raised his eyebrow. Oh, is there any more restrictions on this spell? Well, it is a one-time use, and Hermes said that this is a powerful spell. If I know where all mana originates from, I can teleport there. Shiro replied, since this spell essentially allows her to go anywhere. She wasn't sure if she should try to obtain the shard of the garden this way. With time being limited right now, trying to find it manually may be more difficult than what she had expected. But using this spell was akin to trying to kill an ant with a gun. Complete overkill. Should I give it a try? Shiro asked. It's up to you. However, we can fly around a bit and explore the world since our flight speed is fast. If we still can't find it, then we use the spell. How about that? Nantien suggested. While they were indeed short for time, they were still able to take a few moments to explore and see if they could find it themselves. Plus, with Shiro being able to teleport to astral horizons at any moment she wished, it was a simple task to teleport away, right after they obtained the shard. Wait a minute. Your teacher said that he discovered astral horizons on his journey, right? What if he had discovered more of the world? His knowledge of the map would be much better, plus the map skill will show him what he's found so far. Nantien reminded as Shiro raised her eyebrow before nodding her head. That's right. Teach. Does have that. Let me call him. Pulling out her phone, Shiro dialed Stanley's number and waited for him to pick up. Hello? Stanley speaking? His voice rang out. Teach. It's me, Shiro. So, you know how you traveled to the unexplored areas for a while, right? Shiro asked. I did. Are you perhaps curious about what I found? Stanley replied. Kind of. You see, I'm trying to find this place which contains something very important, and it seems to be in the unexplored areas. I was thinking if you have a more advanced map of the world, or perhaps you might know of this location. I'll see what I can do then. Where are you right now? I want you to tell me your coordinates on the map. Stanley asked as Shiro checked her map and told him her coordinates. Not too long after she did this, she heard the phone hang up and a portal appear in front of them. So where is this place that you wanted to go? Stanley asked curiously as Shiro paused for a moment since she didn't expect Stanley to appear before them. Ah, right, here's the map. Giving him the map that showed her where the shard is, Stanley frowned and examined it a few times. I know where that is, he said with a frown. You do? Shiro widened her eyes. Yes, but teleportation doesn't work there. This was the place where I found a few treasures, including the dagger that I gave you. But the dangers there are insane. No spatial magic works there, so you can't jump into the rift or teleport out. Even the special magic circle that I use to help me ignore these restrictions is useless there. The best I can do is teleport you close to it. Stanley shook his head. Where is it exactly? Shiro asked. It's to the far, far west of this world. I think it took me a few months of travel to find that place. I kept traveling west, while hardly stopping to explore the other places I found, Stanley replied. I see. But there are other problems, such as the native race of the outside world. They are quite hostile, and it took me a while to gain their trust. Eh? There are races that live outside in the unexplored area? Shiro asked, as Stanley nodded. Getting to the island would be hard if you have these races trying to kill you around every corner, Stanley replied. If we disguise ourselves, do you think we'll be able to get past them? I'm not sure, since I wasn't able to do it before I was discovered. There are also dangers at the island, so you need to be careful. If you want, I can come with you. I'll escort you as far as I can. Stanley offered as Shiro thought about it for a moment. It'll be fine, Teach. We should be able to handle it. Plus, you're already helping by teleporting us over there. Oh, speaking of which, are there any teleport shrines outside? Well, there are. I can transfer their locations to you while I send you to the island. Nodding her head, the trio made their way to a teleport shrine. Setting down some nodes, Shiro wanted to see how far each teleport shrine was, so that she could start mapping out everything herself. Spending the next hour teleporting around, Stanley transferred a total of 28 teleport shrines to Shiro. I don't have any inside of town. Or city, since I wasn't trusted enough for that yet. Stanley sighed as Shiro shook her head. No, this is plenty already, Teach. Having these 28 new places helps out a lot, since it's much more than what the government has provided me. Nodding his head, Stanley did one final teleport, but this time it was with his own magic. Finding themselves on a cliff near the sea, Shiro could see islands in the distance. That's where you want to be going. Are you sure you don't want me to join you? Stanley asked with concern, since he understood the dangers that are on the island. It's fine. I don't want to trouble Teach any more than necessary. Plus, I can look after myself. Nantian's also here just in case too. Shiro smiled as Stanley sighed. You're not troubling me. I'm just worried about your safety. Seeing Stanley being genuinely worried about her safety, Shiro thought about it for a moment before nodding her head. While you're worried for me, I'm also worried for you, okay? Both me and Lil Tien have ways to heal ourselves if things go south. But I don't know if you got the skills to do the same, Shiro said as Stanley laughed. What kind of mage do you think I am? Of course, I have ways to heal myself if things go south, Stanley replied as Shiro shrugged her shoulders. Fair. But before we start, I think there are a few things that you need to know, Teach. Oh, and what's that? Well, my main class is actually rather special. You see, my main class is something called a Nanomancer. I'm able to create these little robots at will, and they can turn into anything I want, from items to weapons. They're quite handy, so don't be shocked if I suddenly summon high-tech things like, it's normal, I guess, Shiro replied as she summoned some nanobots for Stanley to look. At Tect, examining the nanobots, he was surprised to see that they were tiny, living robots in a way that continuously absorbed a bit of mana. Fascinating. What exactly do you mean by summoning high-tech? Stanley asked as Shiro snapped her finger and the nanobots returned to her hand. What do you want to see? Guns, mech suits, tracking devices, vehicles or others? Shiro asked. But not something too big in case people find us, she said as Stanley nodded his head. His main focus in what she said was guns, as everyone was interested in who owned the guns that killed quite a few people in the Elven continent. Hearing that Shiro could make guns, he had a feeling that she could be the culprit all along. Can I see the guns? He asked. Nodding her head, Shiro flexed her fingers as a hand cannon and sniper were created. Seeing the guns, Stanley confirmed that his thoughts were indeed correct. Normally I would warn you about the government, but seeing as though you have stolen their map without harm, you probably don't worry about them. He smiled. Yep. Shiro grinned. So how do we get to the island? From what I can tell, it seems like there's a barrier that's preventing us from traveling through air, she asked while gesturing towards the island. We'll have to trouble the locals. Did you know? The first time I came here, I was actually endangered by the waves. When I lost my power of flight, I dropped down into the ocean and the currents almost swept me away. If the locals didn't help me, I might have died. Stanley sighed and glanced towards the sea that had almost killed him. Wait, you almost died to the water? Shiro asked with surprise, since even if he lost his power of flight, surely he could use magic to make himself a platform to escape from. Man! Every time I tried to use magic in the sea, my mana was drained rapidly, causing the spell to fail. I did a few experiments in trying to extract the water, but it seems like it's a special property that only happens in that sea. Any water that is removed loses this property and becomes normal seawater, Stanley explained as he walked down the path with Shiro and Nantian following behind him. The locals are called the ManhwaRecap clan, and they are similar to elves in a way. They have pointed ears much like the elves, but they have light blue skin, red eyes, and horns on their head. There are, how can I explain this? Two types of Navuris. The warrior type and the common folk, I suppose. The warriors are born with incredible physiques at birth, while the common folk are like normal babies. The warriors have an advantage when it comes to combat, since they are innately born to be fighters. Hence why I call them the warrior type. The warrior type Navuri are born with a singular horn on their head, while the common folk are born with two horns. While the common folk are not blessed with great physiques at birth, some are born with a talent for magic, but it's not obvious until they come of age. Once they do, they can study under a teacher and become mages. But there is one weakness inherent to the mages. When they lose their horns, their casting ability decreases dramatically. This is the same for warriors as they lose some of their incredible strength and speed, Stanley explained as Shiro nodded her head. Hearing about the Navuris, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like had they been situated closer to the humans. But remembering the things that happened back in Arya, Shiro could only sigh, since their horns would have definitely been cut off and sold like what they do with animals. Ranob de Ies. The Navuris have a few traditions, but the one you need to keep in mind the most is that you must respect the warriors, or else you'll be insulting all of them. They have quite a strict hierarchy, so even as an outsider you need to show some respect to them, Stanley informed as Shiro nodded her head. That, and also you might want to hide or change your appearance a little. The warrior males are known to be non-monogamous, so if you catch their eye, they'll try to drag you into their harems. This is the same with the female warriors. Thankfully, they look down on mages, so I was spared. Stanley chuckled. Oh? Why do they look down on mages? Shiro asked curiously. Because their philosophy is that they can just kill a mage easily if they get close. Plus, they've been wrestling the monsters that threaten them, so they're inclined to think that warriors are stronger. Plus, their mages aren't the best, so I haven't shown anything too crazy to them. At most, their mages can cast a few low-tier spells that deal moderate damage. Their development with mages is weak, while their understanding of warriors is high. Hence why they favor warriors, Stanley explained. But if they knew what mages could do, they would think otherwise. Shiro laughed. True, but if you said that in front of them, you would have made yourself public enemy number 1. Stanley chuckled. Wait, what? Yup, so try to be careful, okay? Stanley smiled as Shiro could only nod her head, since she didn't realize they were that sensitive. Anything else we need to keep in mind? Nantien asked. Right. You should avoid using masks, since they will ask you to reveal yourself with some hostility. Hearing this, Nantien furrowed his brows. Taking off his mask, he cast a disguise skill on himself to look a little more common. You should do the same, Shiro, Nantien said as Shiro agreed, since she wasn't too keen on someone trying to drag her into a harem. Activating disguise on herself, she made herself look like an average person, one that would fade into the crowd rather than stand out. Too pretty. You still need to disguise yourself a little more, since you would still draw their attention if you look like that, Stanley said after a moment of thought. Aye? Seriously? Shiro asked. Yep. Sighing heavily, Shiro made herself look worse than average, as she couldn't help but shed a tear in her heart. After all, she was still a maiden in heart. She still wanted to look good. Okay, why do you not want Nantien to see you when you look like this? Nimue asked with a smug smile. Shut it, you. Shiro pouted as Nimue only laughed. You know, since I'm in here, I can hear your thoughts loud and clear. Same goes with Izuel and Estrella, Nimue said with a knowing smile. Clicking her tongue, Shiro only ignored them while glancing towards Nantien for a moment. What is it? Nantien asked curiously, seeing Shiro glance towards him. After all, she normally wanted something from him when she looked towards him. Nothing. Shiro coughed. See? Ignoring Nimue, Shiro followed behind. Stanley raised his eyebrow while guiding the two towards where the Navuris lived. Their home city was located next to the sea, so it wasn't hard for them to spot out from the distance. Their city is called Nilyuk, and this city is a branch, I suppose. Their capital is still quite a distance away, Stanley said as they approached the edge of the city. Watching as two guards suddenly approached, Shiro tilted her head as she did not understand a single word that had just come out of their mouths. It's their language. I'll communicate and translate for you. Don't worry, Stanley chuckled, but Shiro was already doing some preparations of her own. On her wrist was a bracelet that analyses the language and translates it for her. All she needed to do was memorize it and wait for the translation to be confirmed. What do you think they're talking about? Nantien whispered over as Shiro shrugged her shoulders. I don't know, but I'm analyzing their language right now. If you want, I can make you a translator so that everything you hear will be translated and everything you say will also be translated. Shiro whispered back as Nantien nodded his head. That would be helpful. Unfortunately, I'm not as talented as you are in that regard. He smiled softly. Well, not many people are. My mind is essentially a computer, after all. Shiro shrugged. True. After a few short moments, Stanley turned back to the two. They were just wondering who you two are. They know me since I spent a bit of time here, but they're on guard about you two. You'll need to be monitored by guards at all times when you're in the city, and your weapons have to be confiscated, Stanley explained as Shiro nodded her head. Do they know about inventory, or can I get away with that? Shiro asked. They don't, but the moment you use the inventory, they'll see that you have weapons all along and won't trust you at all. Plus, they can't see how many weapons you have, so that would make it even harder for them to trust you, Stanley replied. Well, I won't be killing anyone, so I doubt I'd summon a weapon. So tell them, no, I don't have any weapons, or better. Yet, just say that we're mages. Shiro smiled as Nantien agreed. After all, they looked down on mages, so it was a good way to not raise suspicion. In their minds, 2 mages couldn't do any major damage, sure. Turning back to the guards, Stanley spoke a few words as Shiro glanced at the bracelet to see how much of the language has been decoded so far. Seeing that it was only at 10%, Shiro sighed, since it made sense. They were only having a few basics. Conversations. If she wanted the full picture, she would need to spend more time and let the bracelet analyze the language some more, which she wasn't too against, since she was curious about what this race of people were like. She was also curious about what their materials were. After all, the anchor is also composed of the materials you can find in this world. So seeing what materials are provided from the unexplored areas would be very helpful. They said they're still going to leave a few guards with us to keep watch. After all, you two are newcomers, and they did the same with me. Stanley turned back to the two. O.B. Sheesh. That's fine. Do you know what they use to pay for stuff? Shiro asked. Since the Navuri didn't have access to inventory, she wasn't sure about their interactions with the system. It could be that they don't have the system at all, or it could be that they lack a few privileges. They use coins that you earn here. I have some on me, but we're essentially broke right now. Stanley chuckled as Shiro sighed. I see. Do you think we'll have enough to buy some materials? Oh, definitely. The price of materials is pretty cheap. I was thinking that you wanted weapons or the such. They don't have many blacksmiths, so any weapons they make are very expensive. So the base materials are cheap in comparison, Stanley replied. Oh, that's pretty good then. If there are new rare or new materials, I'll want to check them out since it could be important. Who knows, my nanobots might be able to copy their compositions if they're strong. Shiro chuckled as Stanley nodded his head. Give me a moment then. I'll ask these two about giving us an entrance pass as well as the guards that need to watch over us. Nodding her head, Shiro glanced up at the city walls. Looking at the architecture, Shiro was quite surprised to see that it was very reminiscent of Western architecture of castles that she had seen on the internet. She could see several guards, with bows that were observing them with caution but no hostility, which was a good sign. At least they're neutral. If it was humans, it might have been hostility in their gaze. Shiro thought to herself, as humans are quite racist, for a lack of a better term. After being on the top of the food chain for quite some time, it's difficult for them to accept someone being higher than them. This was what happened in her past life when the humans couldn't accept the demi-humans and they were enslaved. Hell, even the monsters were used for sexual relief. Thankfully, she hadn't seen anything of the sort so far in this world, which made her smile. She could understand why, though, since no one cared if a monster died or not. If a person made love to a monster, it was more the person's problem than the people who know of it. Sure, it was strange, but it wasn't like they were forcing a human to do the act. If I was caught when I wasn't strong enough, things would have gotten rough. Shiro thought with a sigh. Especially with your looks. As crude as this sounds, you would be classed as a high-quality product. Nimue shrugged. Ugh, don't call me that. It just gives me chills down the spine. Shiro made a disgusted face, since itemizing her as a tool for sexual relief only made her want to throw up. I know, I'm just making an example. Don't worry, haha. Nimue chuckled. As she was talking to Nimue, Addie reached out and tugged at Shiro's sleeve. You want me to pick you up? Shiro smiled as Addie nodded his head. Picking Addie up, Shiro wondered if she should bring Addie out without raising suspicion. Teach, do you think I can bring out my son and they not question it? Shiro asked curiously. Probably not. They'll think about how you brought him out and question if you have any weapons hidden away, Stanley replied as Shiro clicked her tongue. Fair. Sorry, darling. It seems like I can't bring you out just yet. Shiro sighed as Addie pouted for a moment before nodding his head. But don't worry, I'll bring you out to have some fun after I finish my work, okay? Shiro smiled as Addie nodded his head. Thinking about it for a moment, he blushed and pecked her on the cheek before waddling away. Arg! Why is my son so cute? Shiro smiled as Nimue rolled her eyes. Why are you like this with Addie, but not Yin and Lysandra, huh? Well, Yin grew up quite quickly and she has been quite the prankster. Lysandra has always been the serious type. Naturally, I still pamper them, but Addie's the only one that stayed as a baby for quite some time, so... Shiro shrugged. To her, babies were cute, so she wanted to take advantage of it as much as she could before he grew up. When he does, he'll become the handsome man she saw in the future. They still need love, even though it might embarrass them. Nimue chuckled. True. I'm not that good of a mother, am I? First time for everything. But while you may not be a great mother in terms of attention giving, no one would want to pick on your children since they'll incur your wrath. Nimue laughed. True. If I see anyone bullying my child, don't expect me to go easy on them. Humph. Shiro frowned. Shiro, they're children. Are you really going to rain destruction down on a child? Nimue's smile twitched. Well, maybe not destruction, but they'll pay for bullying my child? You are also quite possibly the most overprotective parent. Nimue shrugged. Taking to Nimue for a bit longer, Shiro watched as 2 guards approached them and stand near them. We can enter now. Stanley smiled. Entering the city with 2 guards following behind them, Shiro could see the Navori people looking at them with curiosity. Some of the children would point towards them and speak to their parents. Surprisingly, they were quite hospitable, acting. As the translator for now, Stanley informed Shiro about what they were asking about. It was mostly the generic questions, such as who they were and where they came from. Answering them with a smile, Shiro watched as the percentage of the translator go up. They're asking if you want to try some of the local delicacies, Stanley said as Shiro thought about it for a moment. Well, our goal is the island. No? Do we have enough time to try everything out? Shiro asked. We're going to be needing their help to get to the island anyways. Taking a moment to make some connections isn't bad either. Plus, we can do some part-time work to earn some money in the process, Stanley suggested as Shiro nodded her head. Sure then. The local delicacies were mostly seafood, but the meat was quite strange as it wasn't rich with mana. Compared to the food she had eaten in the human territories, this wasn't as filling due to the lack of mana, but it was rather tasty. There was quite a lot of shellfish as well, which Shiro enjoyed quite a bit. However, a few of the dishes were quite raw, which she wasn't as enthusiastic about. After eating some of the local delicacies, Shiro walked around to the shops that sold materials that could be found around this area. Most of them were quite common, but the mana density was abnormally low. With a low man density, the materials weren't as good as what she could get in city. Sighing softly, she could only give up on getting materials. Have you noticed it? Stanley asked as Shiro nodded her head. Unlike Astral Horizons, this place is abnormally low in mana. From the materials to the food, I'd say it's equivalent to probably New York. Shiro frowned. I haven't found the source of this phenomenon, but I can say for sure that the closer you get to the island, the less mana there is. On the island, I found it to be almost impossible to regenerate mana. Stanley shook his head. Robots. Do you think something is absorbing the mana? Nantien asked as Shiro nodded her head. Most likely, it's probably on the island too. Shiro shrugged. We can probably find the source if we spend a bit of time on the island. Last time I wasn't able to find the source, since I had to escape while I could. Stanley shrugged. This is where you got the rainbow dagger, right? Shiro asked. Yep. Speaking of which, did you get anything good from it? I know that it said you can have a technique used by the gods. Well, I wouldn't call it a technique. It's more of a passive skill that I can use. It's called Item Master, and I can use everything to maximum efficiency, which includes swords, guns, and so on. Shiro explained as Stanley halted halfway through his step and glanced towards her with confusion. Pardon? I can use any and every item to its maximum efficiency using my pre-existing knowledge and understanding. If I don't know how to use it, then my passive doesn't work. Shiro explained as Stanley took a deep breath and calmed himself. Seems like the item was changed. Honestly, this is probably better than any technique you can find. Stanley chuckled as Shiro agreed. Yep, and honestly, it's very helpful with what I do, Shiro admitted, since she has been able to upgrade quite a few of her blueprints thanks to this passive. Hell, even her flying fortress had been upgraded. I see. Anyways, want to go look for a place to stay for a while? We'll need to work on gaining trust, so I'd say it'll take around a week or so for them to guide you to the island, Stanley said as Shiro nodded her head. Finding a place to stay, Shiro had a room to herself, while Nantien and Stanley shared a room. Waking up the next day, they went around looking for a bit of work. Eventually, Shiro decided to work as a chef, since Item Master allowed her to make an amazing meal thanks to her being able to use the resources to their maximum efficiency. Gaining trust through their stomachs as a chef, she worked with Nantien, as he would be the waiter. After a day, her translator finally finished translating everything, and they were shocked that Shiro had learned their language so quickly. This only helped her gain their trust more since it showed them her sincerity in a way as they believed she had dedicated her time to study their language. Spending a week or so here, Shiro was pretty familiar with most of the people that come to eat her food. This morning, Stanley had just informed her that he had booked them a boat to the island, so she was making some final preparations. Writing a sign outside the restaurant that she was working in, she watched as the customers walked through the door. "Today's the last day?" one of the customers asked. Yeah. I'll be traveling to the island with my friends today, so I won't be working for a while," Shiro replied with a chuckle. "Ah, that's a real shame then. Your food is so much nicer than what we had before." "Put, Mr. Aldori. If you had said that in front of the chefs, they would have banned you from coming here," Shiro laughed. "Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. Everyone knows that your food is the best here." Aldori smiled as the people following behind him agreed. "Well, since it's the last time I'm going to be cooking, the boss agreed that the food will be 25% off. So tell me your orders and I'll cook them." Shiro grinned as they cheered. Spending the new few hours cooking food constantly, they were able to earn much more than before, despite having a 25% deal since more people wanted to try her food. They were on the fence before, but hearing that there was a deal, as well as this being the last time she was going to cook, the ones that haven't tried yet decided to give it a go. But once they tried her cooking, they were feeling regretful since they didn't come to eat sooner. Packing up, Shiro saw Nantien and Stanley waiting patiently as they had both finished their prep. "Ready?" Stanley asked with a smile. Making their way to the docks, Shiro could see a rather sizable boat with a crew of Navuri on the deck. "Do we need such a big crew?" Shiro asked as Stanley nodded. "Depending on what happens, the ocean could become quite rough, so it'll come in handy." Stanley smiled as Shiro nodded her head. "Welcome. The crew is ready and we can set off at any moment." The captain smiled as Stanley nodded his head. "Let's go then. I hope to get to the island before nightfall." Stanley replied, "Of course. As per agreement, we shall wait on the island for a week. Afterwards, we'll leave." The captain reminded. "Yeah, that's fine." Stanley nodded. "Are you sure a week is fine? What if we stay for longer?" Shiro asked, as she wasn't sure about how long they could take. "Well, if it takes more than a week, then we have other ways of leaving the island. Right now, a week should be fine," Stanley replied as Shiro nodded her head. "Fair enough." Getting into the boat, Shiro sat by the side with Stanley to her left and Nantien to her right. Glancing out at sea, Shiro could feel her magic halt, as the feeling was a little strange since she could no longer fly. But it didn't affect her too much. As for Nantien, he furrowed his brows a little, but other than that, he wasn't too affected either. Navigating through the ocean, the boat rocked back and forth as Shiro could understand how this would affect her, teacher, if he could no longer fly. Their journey took a few hours, but they arrived at the island before night fell. Stepping on the island, Shiro could feel her skin tingle from the cold winds, which was abnormal considering her ice resistance, narrowing. Her eyes? She took a deep breath and prepared herself.